I was dying, and nobody knew where I was. Not my parents, not my friends, not a single person in the world knew that I was pressed against a wall in my own hallway with something's hands around my throat, my feet off the floor, my vision collapsing inward at the edges. Nobody was coming. Nobody could see me. I had been invisible for weeks, and I was going to die invisible, and my body would rot somewhere in the space between this world and whatever dark place I had been pushed into, and nobody would ever find me. That thought did something to me. Not despair, the opposite of despair. A terror so pure and so electric that my dying heart heard it and responded. A voice from somewhere underneath the fear that said, "Not like this. Not invisible. Not without a fight." I found the first finger coiled around my throat. I grabbed it and I pulled, and I felt the bones snap backward, and the shriek that came out of the thing wearing my face almost tore my eardrums clean through. That was the moment I decided I was going to survive. This is the story of what I came back from, and what it cost me to get here. We lived near the edge of a cliff, not dangerously close, but close enough that I could slip out on weekend mornings and follow the gentle slope all the way down to the stream below, where the water was cold and clear and the world felt like it belonged entirely to me. My parents never knew about the stream. That was mine. What belonged to all three of us was the house above it. I was a spirited child, wild-haired, loud laughing, always moving, always hungry. My mother was my cushion. That is the only word for her. When the world was too much or too fast, she was the place I landed. She loved to tame my hair in the evenings, her fingers working through the tangles with patient, practiced hands, and I would fight sleep the whole time and lose every single night, drifting off against her without meaning to. I never told her how much I loved those moments. I assumed she already knew. She made spaghetti and meatballs the way nobody else in the world could. I don't know what she put in the sauce. I never thought to ask, and now I wish more than anything I had. But the best part was never the sauce. The best part was the secret. Every single time, without fail, beneath the mound of spaghetti on my plate, there would be one extra meatball hiding at the bottom. Just one. Never mentioned, never pointed out. I would dig down and find it and look up at her, and she would be looking somewhere else entirely, completely innocent, the smallest smile at the corner of her mouth. Our secret. Every time like the first time. My father taught me everything else. When he came home from work, the house shifted, became warmer, louder, fuller. We would sit together at the kitchen table and work through my homework, but the part I lived for was after, the dictionary game. We would open it to any page, find a word neither of us knew, and then we both had to sketch something, anything, that captured what the word meant to us. Camel, constellation, rampart, longitude. It didn't matter. We sketched and argued and laughed, and his drawings were always terrible, and I told him so every time, and he never improved and never stopped trying. He called me sweet cakes, had since I was small, never explained why, never stopped. I pretended to find it embarrassing. I would have been devastated if he ever stopped. Our home smelled of cinnamon, every single day, warm dough and cinnamon drifting from the kitchen like the house itself was breathing. My mother baked the way other people breathe, naturally and without thinking, and I associated that smell so completely with safety and love that even now certain bakeries stop me cold in the street. I squealed every time I saw cake, every time, without exception, like I had never seen one before. It always made them laugh, both of them together, the same laugh at the same moment. I liked my whipped cream on the side, never on the cake. My mother knew this. My father knew this. It was the kind of small, specific thing that only the people who truly know you ever bother to remember. I was the best student in my class. My parents were proud in the quiet way that meant more than any noise could. On clear days, my father would fold paper with me into bright-colored planes, and we would stand at the cliff edge together and throw them out into the open air, watching them catch the wind and sail impossibly far down the slope, tiny colored specks disappearing into the green below. I thought that was what life was. color and warmth and the smell of cinnamon, and someone who always knew exactly how you liked your whipped cream. I had no idea how quickly all of it could be taken away. My parents had a function in the city that Saturday. I had been waiting for exactly that kind of opportunity for weeks. The moment their car disappeared down the road, I changed into my swim clothes, grabbed my shoes, and slipped down the slope toward the stream. The clouds were out, thick and soft, turning the light gray and cool. By the time I reached the bottom, the trees had closed their canopy overhead, and the world had shrunk to just the nook of the stream, the cold, clean water, the sway of large branches, and the small coins of sunlight pressing through the leaves. My friends were already there. It was a perfect day. It was coming back up the hill that everything changed. I spotted Miller near the top of the slope. My friend Miller, who never went anywhere without his friendship bracelet, not once in all the years I had known him. He was walking away from a woman standing further down the path, a woman I had noticed on our way down, holding a young boy by the hand. The boy was gone now. I called out to Miller and asked how he knew her, where the boy had gone. He walked straight past me without stopping, smiling in a way that sat wrongly on his face, mumbling that he was tired and going home. Something about that smile made my stomach turn. I went down to ask the woman myself. The moment I stepped into her space, the world went silent. Not quiet, silent. The birds stopped. The stream stopped. The wind that had been moving the trees all afternoon simply ceased, like someone had reached into the day and switched it off. I stood there in that sudden, impossible stillness and looked at her properly for the first time. She was old and haggard, wearing a long, threadbare trench coat despite the season, boots so worn I could see the shape of her feet through them. She looked like someone the world had forgotten entirely. Then a girl stepped out from behind her, roughly my age, roughly my height, dressed in rags, her face slightly wrong in a way I couldn't immediately name, like a drawing of a person done from memory rather than life. The girl called the woman Mother. The old woman raised one finger and pointed it directly at me. I ran. Or I tried to. My legs had become something else, heavy, distant, no longer fully mine. The girl moved toward me with a speed that belonged to nothing human, and when she got close enough, I could smell her breath, rancid and sweet and rotting, like apples left too long in the dark. She was smiling, or doing something with her mouth that resembled smiling. She grabbed my hands with fingers that burned like fever, and I opened my mouth to scream, and then there was nothing. I woke up with sand against my cheek, dark sky above me, the cliff edge 2 meters away. I lay there for a moment, trying to understand how I had traveled from the bottom of the slope to the top of it without any memory of the journey. Then I stood up, and the wrongness hit me immediately. I could move my feet against the ground, but I could not feel the earth beneath them. I could see the wind moving the grass around me, but I could not feel it against my skin. I existed in the world the way a reflection exists in water, present, visible, touching nothing. The house was locked. I knocked and heard nothing back, but I could hear them inside. My parents, home early from the city, their voices moving through the rooms I knew better than anywhere on earth. The dogs in the neighboring yard were barking wildly, endlessly, at something they could sense but not see. I wondered why my parents couldn't hear the noise. Then I understood. They could hear everything. They simply could not hear me. That was when I heard the laugh, coming from inside my house, from my kitchen. A laugh shaped like mine but slightly hollow, like an echo of a thing rather than the thing itself. I went to the window. She was sitting at my table in my clothes, her face arranged into an expression of contentment so studied and deliberate it made my skin crawl. My mother was beside her, setting down a plate of cake. My mother's cake, the cinnamon cake that smelled like paradise, the cake I had squealed at since I was small enough to fit in my father's arms. My mother was smiling at her, the same smile she had always given me. The thing at my table looked up, looked directly at the window, directly at my face, and smiled back at my mother with whipped cream spread across the top of the cake. I never ate my cake with whipped cream on top. My mother had known that since I was old enough to ask for it on the side. It was the kind of small, specific thing only the people who truly know you ever bother to remember. She didn't notice. She just kept smiling. I pressed my hand against the glass and felt nothing. Not the cold, not the surface, nothing. A ghost that could not walk through walls, locked outside my own life while something rotten sat inside it wearing my face, eating my cake the wrong way, stealing the smile my mother had always saved. I pressed my hand against the glass and felt nothing. Not the cold, not the surface, nothing. A ghost that could not walk through walls, locked outside my own life while something rotten sat inside it wearing my face, eating my cake the wrong way, stealing the smile my mother had always saved for me. Miller never went anywhere without his friendship bracelet. I understood now where the boy the old woman had been holding was. I understood what had happened to Miller on the way back up the hill. And I understood with a cold, settling certainty what had been done to me. I had been replaced, and my parents had no idea. I could not bring myself to leave. I told myself it was strategy, that I needed to watch, to understand, to find a weakness. But the truth was simpler and more desperate than that. If I walked away from that window, I would lose sight of my own life, and some part of me was terrified that if I stopped watching, it would simply continue without me forever. So I clung to the walls of my home and I watched. The entity was meticulous. It kept my parents close, monopolized their attention, performed the role of their beloved daughter with a dedication that would have been impressive if it weren't so horrifying. It laughed at the right moments. It sat where I always sat. It moved through my home with the careful precision of something that had studied me from a distance and was now executing what it had learned. But at night, I saw what it was really doing. My mother sat alone in the kitchen, exhausted, the bags beneath her eyes deep and dark, her movements slow in a way I had never seen before. She was cooking. For the entity, only for the entity. Plate after plate of food that disappeared without nourishment, consumed and consumed and consumed, while my parents grew thinner by the day. The entity was not eating the food. It was eating something else entirely, something the food was merely a vessel for, and my parents were the source. The housework had stopped completely. The garden was untended, the laundry piled. My parents moved through their days with the glazed, dutiful devotion of people who had forgotten they were allowed to want anything for themselves. Their whole world had narrowed to one point, the creature wearing my face, and it was draining them of everything they had left. I had to get inside. I just needed an opening. The entity had one unavoidable weakness. It still had to pretend to be me. That meant school. One morning, I watched it leave through the front door in my clothes with my school bag on its shoulders, and I positioned myself by the entrance and waited. My mother stepped out briefly, distracted, and left the door open behind her for just a moment. I slipped inside. The smell hit me first. Ammonia and rot, thick and suffocating, coating the back of my throat. Rotten food sat in scattered piles across the kitchen counter and floor. Plates that had never been cleared, fruit that had turned black, things I couldn't identify anymore. This was my home, the home that had always smelled of cinnamon and warm dough. I stood in the middle of it and felt something break quietly inside my chest. I found my mother in the hallway and screamed her name until my throat burned. She stared straight ahead. I reached for her, and my hands passed through her like she was made of smoke, like I was the ghost and she was the dream. Up close, the damage was worse than I had seen through the window. Her skin had thinned and darkened, covered in spots that had not been there weeks ago. She moved like someone carrying a weight she could no longer name, her eyes focused on something just past the visible world. I followed her to my room. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, then crossed to my dresser and picked up my comb. She held it the way you hold something you are trying to remember, turning it slowly, her thumb moving across the teeth, her brow furrowed with the effort of reaching something just beyond her grasp, a memory with no name attached to it anymore. "Mom," I said, "I'm right here, it's me. I'm right here." She turned toward my voice. For one single second, one fraction of a breath, something moved behind her eyes. A flicker, a recognition trying to surface through everything that had been done to her. I stepped toward her and reached out, and the moment passed, and her eyes went flat and empty again. Then the front door opened. The entity entered the room and ignored my mother completely. Instead, it moved to my things, picking through them, holding them, smelling my clothes with a slow, deliberate attention while my mother called for it from downstairs. It stayed far longer than it needed to. It was looking for something. Then it looked directly at me. Across the room, through the space where I stood invisible and untouchable, it fixed me with a look of pure venom, cold and ancient and aware. It knew I was in the house. It couldn't touch me, and it couldn't expose me, and it hated both of those things with everything it had. I held its gaze and did not move. I was invisible, but I was inside, and now I knew two things. My mother could almost feel me when she held my belongings, and the entity was afraid of something I hadn't yet understood. That was enough to build on. Watching my father deteriorate was a different kind of pain entirely. My mother's decline had been gradual, something I could almost convince myself I was misreading. But my father had always been large in a room, present, warm, filling whatever space he occupied with an energy that made everything feel more solid. Watching that disappear was like watching a building come down. He was gaunt now, his skin hanging loose, deep lines carved into his face that had not been there a month ago. His eyes had the same distant, filmed quality as my mother's. He moved through the house like a man walking underwater. They were both still going to the store, still buying food, still bringing it home and placing it before the entity with the devotion of people performing a sacred ritual, and then not eating, not feeding themselves, giving everything and keeping nothing. The maggots had reached the corners of the kitchen now, moving through the rot in slow, patient waves. They did not have long. I retreated to the basement where the entity never came. It avoided me with the same deliberate care I gave it. We moved through the house like opposing magnets, never touching, never speaking, maintaining our cold and furious distance. But avoidance worked both ways, and the basement gave me time to think. My mother responded to my objects. That was real. That had happened. When she held my comb, something in her had almost surfaced, some deep buried knowing that the right stimulus might bring all the way up. The problem was proximity. I could not touch her. I could not hand her anything directly. I needed her to come to my room, pick up something of mine, and stay long enough for whatever was trying to surface to finally break through. So I waited. I watched the pattern of her days, and I found the window I needed, the quiet hour in the late afternoon when she drifted to my room alone, before the entity returned from wherever it went, when the house was still and her guard was at its lowest. I had one chance to reach her. I was going to take it. Seen Miller since the slope, but if he had come back wearing his bracelet, he had found a way through. I climbed out through the basement window and ran. He saw me before I saw him. That alone stopped me cold. 3 weeks of being invisible to every living person, and suddenly a pair of eyes found mine from across the street and recognized what they found there. The relief of it was physical. We grabbed each other and held on for a moment without speaking. The bracelet was back on his wrist. He told me everything. That he could see me because he had been where I was and fought his way back. That the replaced ones could always recognize each other. It was one of the few mercies of the situation. He told me how he had won. Love, he said. That was their weakness. Not strength, not weapons. Love. If I could make my parents remember their love for me, genuinely remember it, feel it in their bodies, it would break the entity's hold long enough to make it vulnerable, long enough to touch it. And touching it, he told me with the particular weight of someone who had done it himself, would kill it. He showed me the scar on his shoulder without drama, a deep, ragged thing. He told me it was my fight now, that if I lost, I would join the others, trapped in the in-between place, replaced forever, my parents living out the rest of their lives loving something that was slowly killing them. I thanked Miller. I turned toward home. I ran. I gave Miller my cloud password and told him what to find. My first birthday video, the one my parents had filmed themselves, shaky and laughing, My father's voice behind the camera calling me "sweet cakes," while my mother held me up toward the light. Miller sent it to my father's phone, then sent it again, then again, until it couldn't be ignored. I climbed back in through the basement window and crossed to the sitting room doorway. My father was on the couch, phone in his hand, frozen. The video was playing, his own voice coming back to him from years ago, younger, fuller, completely alive, and something behind his eyes was responding to it the way a drowning person responds to a rope. I watched the fog begin to lift. I watched him come back to himself in fragments, blinking, confused, his hand tightening around the phone as the memory tried to find its footing inside him. "Dad," I said. His head turned toward my voice. "Mom!" I screamed, already moving toward the stairs. "Mom, I'm here!" Her voice came back to me from above, weak, bewildered, but present, more present than I had heard her in weeks. I took the stairs two at a time. My mother had barricaded herself inside my bedroom. The entity was in the hallway. It turned when I reached the top of the stairs, and I saw what it had stopped pretending to hide. The face that had been wearing mine with such careful patience was gone, replaced by something older and rawer, and full of a hatred that had been waiting a long time for this moment. Its fingers had lengthened into claws. Its eyes were the same void I had seen at the bottom of the slope when the old woman had pointed at me. It swung first. The blow connected squarely with my face, and my head snapped back and the world tilted sideways. I grabbed the banister, but my momentum carried me over it and I fell, landing on the ground floor with a force that knocked the air from my body completely. Above me, I could hear the house reacting, a whirlwind building inside the walls, throwing objects from shelves, shattering glass, tearing through every room at once. I got up. I went back up the stairs and grabbed the fireplace poker from the stand in the hallway and swung it twice, right, then left, and hit the entity square across the face. The flesh peeled back where the iron connected, splitting and separating in a way that human skin simply does not. It snarled, a sound from somewhere below language, and lunged. Its hands closed around my throat. My back hit the wall and my feet left the floor, and the claws tightened and the world began to narrow at the edges. I clawed at its fingers. Useless. It squeezed tighter and I felt my vision beginning to collapse inward, darkness crowding the corners, my body making its peace with what was happening. And then I heard my mother crying out my name. From behind the barricaded door, some fragment of memory breaking through, her real voice, the one I had grown up with. And I saw my father's face in my mind the way he looked every single time I told him I loved him. The way it always caught him slightly off guard. The way it always made him look like he had just been given something he hadn't expected. Something ignited in my chest. With everything I had left, I seized two of its fingers and pulled. I felt the bones snap backward, a sound I will never fully leave behind, and the entity's scream shook the walls. Its grip broke. I dropped to the floor, coughing, tasting blood, my vision red at the edges, every breath a separate act of will. But I stood up. The whirlwind had torn through the walls by now, broken pipes spraying water across the floor, loose electrical wires sparking at the far corner near the sink, the whole hallway a chaos of water and exposed current and debris. The entity stood across from me, cradling its broken fingers, staring at me with something new in its expression. Not hatred, something closer to disbelief. I used that second. I grabbed its hair and drove it backward into the broken pipe jutting from the wall. The pipe went through its chest and emerged just below the third rib. It should have ended there. It grabbed me instead, pulling me toward the same sharp edge, snarling, laughing, bleeding something dark and wrong and refusing to die. I looked at the sparking wire. I knew what it would do to me. I picked it up anyway. I pressed the live end against the entity and held it there and did not let go. The current tore through both of us, through its body and back through mine, over and over, my muscles locking, my teeth clenching, my vision going white. I held on. I held on because of the meatball hidden beneath the spaghetti, because of terrible pencil sketches of camels and coins, because of paper planes sailing down a sunlit slope, Because of whipped cream on the side, never on the cake. Because of sweet cakes. I held on until it started to smoke, until the thing beneath the skin began to swell and push and find every seam it could, until it came apart, not quietly, not cleanly, but completely, dissolving into something between mist and matter, a final, horrible sound escaping it, and then nothing. Then nothing. I let go of the wire, and the floor came up to meet me, and I did not feel it. Its death broke the spell the way dawn breaks darkness, completely and all at once. My parents could see me. Every real memory of me came flooding back into them simultaneously. Not gradually, not in fragments, all of it. Every birthday and breakfast and evening and ordinary moment that had been stolen and stored somewhere and was now returned in full. They found me on the floor. I was not breathing. My father's hands found my chest and my mother's found my face, and they worked with the terrified, furious love of two people who had just remembered everything they almost lost. I heard their voices from somewhere distant and growing closer. I woke with a jolt, gasping, the air rushing back in like the first breath of a life beginning again. They were both crying. I was crying. We held each other on that ruined, wet floor, surrounded by everything the whirlwind had broken, and none of it mattered at all. We were just three people who loved each other, holding on. We almost left the house. My parents talked about it seriously in the weeks after, starting somewhere new, somewhere without the smell of ammonia still hiding in the walls, without the broken plaster and the waterlogged floors and the memories pressed into every corner. I understood the impulse. I felt it myself some mornings. But we loved our house on the hill. We loved the slope and the cliff edge and the evening light that came through the kitchen windows at a specific angle that no other house would ever replicate. So we stayed. We fixed the walls and replaced the furniture and hung new wallpaper over the damage and told ourselves that a home was just a place until the people inside it made it something more. I wished I could fix the other things as easily. My parents look at me differently now. Not always, not every moment, but in the quiet spaces between things, when they think I am not watching, I catch it. A flicker of something behind their eyes. A half-second of uncertainty before the recognition settles back in. They try to hide it from me, and I try to pretend I don't see it, and we both know we are pretending, and none of us say so. That is what the entity took that no amount of new wallpaper can restore. The ease of being known completely. The safety of never being doubted by the people who love you most. I understand why it happened. I hold no anger about it. But I feel the weight of it every single day, and I suspect I always will. I am different too. The free-spirited child who snuck down to the stream without a second thought, who threw herself into the world with both hands open. She is quieter now, more careful. I stay close to home. I have not been back to the stream since the day everything changed, and I am not sure I ever will be.